Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus, and this is Ramesh first. Please to subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates, and conversation with the top non CHROs, thought leaders, and business heads. Today, we are going to dive deep culture versus manager. Why people quit. Joining us, Dr. Sanjeev Dixit, global HR leader, culture, and life coach, and Muhammad Rashid Jaffrey is the chief HRM at Tata, Steel Gamharia, and Sponge Iron Joda. Recently, I did a survey on LinkedIn, and we wrote the question that why do people leave their jobs? There may be various reasons, but we put here two options. That is the one that is the culture, and second that is the manager. So, if I share with you the results, so these are surprising. For the culture, we have received the 45% of votes, and for the manager, we have received 55% of the votes. So first, quickly, I would like to know your initial comment on this survey. How do you see this data, and who is responsible according to you? It is the culture, manager, when people quit the organization.
Hi, Ramesh. Hi, Sanjeev. It's interesting to look at what drives people to quit. And when Ramesh, you're talking about culture and manager, I would say manager is a building block of any organization's culture. And the collective behavior of most managers is what reflects in the culture, right? So it would depend on what is your, at what part of your journey you are in within an organization. Okay, people can join organization with a very compelling value proposition, and you have a word of mouth and you have a brand, and therefore you look forward to joining organizations. But somebody who is new to an organization, for him or her, it's the manager who's the most important influencer for the initial few months and years. Okay, and if the experience with the manager is not very good, you know, for the new joinee, it's the manager and the culture both are same, because he or she has not seen the various parts of the organization, various functions, and various subgroups, and therefore would relate with the manager and construe that behavior as a collective behavior of the organization, right? Very likely. But somebody who's more tenured and would have seen a lot of functions and groups and leaders would have experienced a general culture within the organization. And for a tenured person, leaving an organization would not only be the manager, while the manager would still play a significant role at any point in your career. But if the person sees your tenure and you see that that is a behavior which is encouraged, that is a behavior which is common across groups and leaders, which is not acceptable to me, then therefore you tend to start looking out. So managers are the building block, and culture is kind of an aggregation of multiple managers' behavior. Just to sum up simply.
Right, well said. For the new joinee, both are the same culture and manager. But you're voting for what? For the culture or manager? If you choose
So I don't see, Ramesh, I don't see this as one or the other. They are very strongly intertwined. And it would depend, as I said, is what kind of tenure you are in the organization. Culture, if you have got good managers in an organization, the culture will not be bad. Let us understand that. Okay. And if you're saying the culture is bad, which means most managers are not good, right? So a bad manager in a good culture is still possible. You would say that is a one-off exception cases. But if that exception becomes a norm, then the culture is also bad. Okay. And that also starts pinching people. So while manager would remain the prime reason for people quitting the organization, I would take that point, that stand very clearly. However, saying that only manager is responsible or only culture is responsible would actually be taking a very short-sighted view on the subject.
Dr. Sanjeev, what is your take on this?
I think culture is a very loosely used word. Yeah, across, I think, organization, even not very well understood. Now, what is culture? Let's spend some time to understand culture. Now, when we say culture, is basically the experience each one of us as an employee are having on a day-to-day basis in their workplace. How, what that experience is linked to? That experience is linked to the way the manager, their you can say subordinates, their colleagues are behaving in a regular, consistent manner. Who's influencing those behaviors? Those behaviors are influenced by the senior leaders or senior, you can say, management, who are role modeling a particular set of behaviors day in day out, consciously or subconsciously. Now, let me give an example. Uh, a kind of a organization where the senior leadership or senior management, I will not call leadership, I will call senior management, are driving performance through, I will say, very, very toxic way of working. Right? They are pushing the you can say employees, their team to achieve the monthly numbers, quarterly numbers by any means. There is a stress, there is a negative pressure. Now that becomes the by design or by default the kind of work environment or the ecosystem of that particular organization. What we call it culture. So in an environment like this, the culture becomes very, very toxic, unviable, or not able to, you can say, very, very conducive for talent to sustain while they will perform, but they will not sustain it. They will burn out. There is another set of, you can say, leadership where there is a lot of, I will say, empathy. People listen to each other, understand what is the root cause of performance and non-performance, and jointly they come together and try to address the entire issue of individual as well as team performance. So there is much more collaboration, there is much more listening, there is much more trust level, there is much more transparency in that kind of a setup. Now that's become very, I will say, positive, very collaborative, very trust-oriented culture. So culture and manager are interdependent, and manager is the root of what kind of culture he or she is having in his or team. So within a large culture of an organization, there could be subcultures. So the overall culture might be toxic because of the way the senior management behave, but a manager could also absorb all those negativity and can create a very positive culture for his or her team. So in the same organization, while the attrition could be very high for all the other managers, in this particular manager case, the attrition might not be very high. So the point is, ultimately, what kind of behavior is driving the performance? And behavior is driven by the reinforcers. So what we are celebrating when we're coming to these behaviors? Are we celebrating performance and performance-oriented behavior and compromising on other factors which is important for human sustainability, like trust and transparency and listening and collaboration? So that also create another set of, you can say, I will say, reinforcer by which the uh, the kind of thing which we are getting celebrated and rewarded becomes the I will say the core element of that culture. So if trust is compromised and performance is rewarded, then obviously that is a very, very, I will say, a very, I will say, one-sided kind of a work environment where people will have a very short lifespan and they will burn out. And in the next possible opportunity they will get, they will just move out.
Both are responsible, culture and manager as well, and both are interconnected somehow. It is true. But one thing I
Absolutely.
think who will deliver this culture to you means company has very good employee recognition policy. If your boss is not recommending your name, then how you will get the recognition? Suppose the company has very good training programs, but if your boss is not recommending your name, then how you will get this? So somehow the manager has a little marginal edge when we are talking about the culture and manager. And I think this also reflects somehow in this data. 55% people are voting for the manager and 45% people are voting for the culture. Do you agree with me?
No, I call it 100% a reason for why people work in an organization and people leave the organization. 55% manager and 45% culture is basically a reflection of the respondents, that both are, as I said, critical for any talent to contribute in a very, very sustainable long-term manner. And there are a lot of case studies. You take a Microsoft as a case study. There was a CEO called Steve Ballmer. There was a very, very different culture in terms of a lot of uh, infighting between respective functions. They were having a lot of toxic competition between inter-departments. And reason being, the entire push was how to achieve performance. Even there is a compromise on collaboration. There is a compromise on the way you want to what you call achieve a kind of an environment which is very, very conducive for the talent to grow. And then came Satya Nadella, and then he brought in a lot of collaborative, empathy-oriented work environment where they said, no, there is no silos. I want each one to collaborate to achieve the performance for the organization and not for your vertical or not for your business, you can say, domain. And I think that's where now you see the value of Microsoft has gone way beyond what it was during a previous leadership. So the point I'm trying to make is uh, it is need to be understood. And when you say a manager, what kind of uh, behavior is recognizing or whether he's focusing on the development. Now, what is the kind of uh, terms of engagement and working principles flowing down from the senior management? Whether this manager can uh, survive in this kind of an environment where he can do away with recognizing subjectively, or he can do away with not recommending right people for the right development, you can say, projects. Whether he will get exposed or he will not get exposed. I think that's the thing needed to be understood at a larger context. Because if that is getting, uh, I will say, appreciated, even if you're not reprimanding such behavior, even you are mute to such managers, that becomes I will say, a very contagious problem in the organization. Because looking at that kind of a manager, other manager also start behaving. This is a normal thing. So you have normalized that behavior of such managers, of subjective recognition and politics and recommending only people who are sycophants and not recommending the right, you can say, talent in your team or other team. So psychophancy is also one of the derivative of, you can say, these kind of insecure managers. Politics is another, you can say, manifestation of such insecure managers. And no good talent will survive in a sycophant and a political oriented environment for sure, unless until you also are insecure and don't have that kind of a talent to deliver in a high performing organization. So such organization erode in a due course of time. Their entire, I will say, stickiness of the talent, attraction of the talent. People know, this organization, you can only survive by what do you call, buttering your manager, and because that's the kind of work norms which has been set in.
Right. So, Mr. Rashid, if you see, Dr. Sanjeev has also shared a couple of examples. But if we try to we try to dive deep a little more and try to differentiate a little more culture and the managerial factors. So, how do you see the cultural factors that constitute towards they try to push the employee to resign, and what are the managerial factors that push the employee to resign?
Culture factors are what you experience in the workplace through employee experience and through various policies, processes, okay, and leadership communication. So, if why people would leave a certain kind of a culture, because there may be a value mismatch. with the organization. Okay, they are trying to do something in a manner which I personally don't kind of subscribe to. That is number one, which is about larger purpose. There are policy incongruence, which is an organization. An example I can give is if an organization is not so much focused or appreciative of the needs of diverse set of talent, then their policies will not be very inclusive. And therefore, a talent which is diverse will find that I don't have a right place here, okay, or I'm not cared for, or I don't have the right infrastructure for me, which talks about the thinking about the leadership when it comes to diversity. And therefore, it is something which is a culture which is driving somebody out of the organization. Okay, you're not able to raise your concerns, you don't have enough mechanisms of escalation, enough forums of resolution of your concerns. This is something which will lead people to kind of start looking out. So that is at a cultural level. Okay, uh, collaboration again at the cultural level. You have got your own turfs and you are operating. While I may have a boss who is good, but most of the other cross-functional verticals with whom I have to interact on a day-to-day basis are extremely conscious about their territory, and there's a territorial approach to managing teams. And so the support is not forthcoming. While my boss is encouraging and allowing me within the team, but I'm not able to make an impact through cross-functional collaborations. These are all cultural things because nobody has questioned that, and it is acceptable. Now, when you look at manager, how can manager do this and create a sense where people start looking out? Is by multiple ways. Is by doing micromanagement, which shows a lack of trust. Okay, looking over the shoulder. You're not trusting your people. You're not communicating frequently and clearly. You are showing a prejudiced behavior. You are showing an unfair behavior. The example which Dr. Sanjeev mentioned about not recommending the right people for the training program, which means, or for any recognition, which means you are not fair. So that is where somebody who experiences this will say no. So if somebody's my manager is not fair, which and I don't get something which I deserve over a period of time, a very short period of time, the person will start looking. So on a day-to-day behavior, you see, manager is where the rubber meets the road in terms of the conversations which happen, in terms of is somebody caring, is somebody trusting, is somebody genuinely interested in my career. You may have a beautiful career path in the organization, but my manager is somebody who's not helping me take on those paths, not recommending me for some of those programs, not giving me a feedback where I can go to the next level. So you have a process, but then it's the manager who is impeding. The other way can be my manager wants me to move, but the organization has a policy which says you have to stay 5 years in this role. Before that, nothing doing. So you don't have patience to stay 5 years. Manager cannot take exceptions for you. I'm just giving an example of career and say how both things can play. But if these two go hand in hand, you see people flourishing, respecting, and staying and being happy. That's what we want.
Absolutely right. And Dr. Sanjeev, how do you see maybe sometimes the culture of the organization is not good, but the manager is good, your reporting boss is good. How that reporting boss can compensate that? In the reverse case as well, maybe the reporting boss is not good, but the culture is good. How do you see how these both can compensate?
I think it's a very rare scenario. I think we are talking a very ideal or a very hypothetical situation where culture is good and your reporting manager is not good and vice versa. The reality is, when we say culture, and I think I've highlighted this point, is these are the behaviors which are non-negotiable, role modeled by the most influential people in the enterprise or in the organization. These are non-negotiable. So one organization can decide, this is the CEOs and the CXOs, that, oh, we will achieve performance, focus on the top line, we'll focus on our bottom line, but we will not, you can look at all these, you can say, very high level things like collaboration, trust, empathy, all these elements. We have to achieve performance by hook and crook. Now, that becomes the working norms. I'll make it more simpler. The culture is nothing but the working norms of that organization, the terms of engagement of the senior management versus the middle management versus the front line. Now, what you will see in that kind of a setup where performance has to be achieved, top line and bottom line has to be achieved without focusing on any other element. Rest is semantics, process, policies, your programs, everything is semantics. But the hard thing is that yes, we have to achieve performance by any means. Now, even if any manager wants to try to be very collaborative, try to be, it is not going to last long. It's going to be very having a very short span because he will be outlier. He or she will be outlier, and they will be out of the system very sooner than later. And the team members will also understand that okay, because he's not going in line with or toeing in line with the working norms of the organization, the manager will also have a very short span. And I think that's created a lot of, you can say, insecurity in the organization, and that's where the exodus of mostly the talented people or the very values oriented people happens. Now, the other scenario is where the entire leadership or senior management says, okay, these are our non-negotiable, you can say, terms of engagement. We will never negotiate on trust. We will never negotiate on integrity. We will never negotiate on excellence. We will never negotiate on innovation. And then they start defining what within trusts are the specific, measurable, observable behavior which will be role model by a CEO till the last janitor of the organization. And that start becoming then a part of your entire policies, part of your entire communication, part of your reward recognition, part of your entire career growth and movement, part of your entire L&D drive and initiative. So it get integrated to the overall strategy of the organization. So in every form and norm, you can sense that in this team, there is a high value given to the trust than performance. Performance is the outcome. Trust is the way to achieve that performance. So never, if they find anybody who is compromising on this behavior called trust, he will immediately given feedback. And if he is not turning around, within 3 months, that kind of outlier is moved out. So they don't want to rotten the culture or the working norms of the team just because of one or two such people. And that's where, even during hiring, there is a lot of emphasis is given to check what are the behavior the new incumbent or the new talent or the new leader who is coming into the organization believe in. So is it in line with the belief of the senior management of the or the organization, which is non-negotiable? If yes, he's welcome or she is welcome, right? So that is how a organization is created. The problem and the challenge is culture is the most, I will say, the Z category priority of any board or the any senior management. There are my 27 years of work experience. I think I being the custodian, I being the spearheader, I being the uh, high believer in these kind of giving significance to this importance, my role was mostly to sensitize my CXO team, CEO, my board to emphasize on how we can create a working environment which is beyond balance sheets, which is just beyond the way we want to achieve our quarterly, monthly. Those are important. Those are bread and butter. But for bread and butter, you need to have a very healthy farming land from where you will get the wheat and rice on a regular basis to make those bread and butter. Your supply has to happen on a very sustainable manner. So if you're not creating a what you call farmland, which has got no weeds and have a very healthy soil with a healthy seed, and I'm basically giving a metaphor more from a context of the values which you are ingraining, the kind of the behaviors which you are ingraining into the organization, that will give you a crop and the fruit in a long term, and when I say long term, it is not just long term, it is within, say, 6 to 9 months, your crop is ready to give you another set of managers who also have the same kind of a belief system. So you're basically creating a belief system. And basis research, and Romesh, we have discussed in the previous session also, I coined this term called culture intelligence. So now it is high time that our entire management education and the way the manager behave and the manager are uh, 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 trained and made competent in the organization, they need to now make culture intelligent, which means that they are intelligently using the entire tools and techniques of how I can create a very healthy culture by role modeling right set of behaviors which are non-negotiable, by rewarding and recognizing those behaviors on a sustainable manner that drive people to demonstrate that on a sustainable manner. Otherwise, what is happening in a 90-95% organization, because of this toxicity, there is a, I will say, culture pollution which is happening. And there are all these examples which are coming in of a very unfortunate, you can say, succumbing to that kind of toxic culture or culture pollution. There is a lot of now manifestation and ramification which is happening, whether it is in terms of mental health issues, whether it is in terms of the kind of tendency of people getting burnout, succumbing to those kind of a thing. And so that entire formula of driving performance versus trust, or driving performance versus collaboration, or driving performance versus, I will say, resilience, is now is coming out very, very clearly. So, like in a natural pollution, we are now reducing our age by 10 to 15 years because of that kind of disease pollution is giving to us. Culture pollution is also now reducing the tenure of the talent in the organization because of the kind of disease they are developing, whether mental, whether physical, whether combination of both, and because of which we will now have another you can say challenge, where you will have a entire scarcity of right talent for your organization, and you'll and entire this lobby of driving performance will get busted, because you will get a mediocre talent who will be only delivering very, very mediocre performance.
Dr. Sanjeev, I think you have highlighted here a very important point, is the cultural pollution. So I think
Yes, a culture
also somehow
pollution.
the credit goes to the remote working models. So somehow the collaboration is missing, and the connect, personal connect, that is missing somehow. So Mohammed Rashid, how do you see in remote working era, when we are in remote working era, most of the people are working. So here the more responsibility goes on the managers when we check here the manager versus culture. So I think manager is a little more responsible here in remote working era. What is your take on this?
I would say remote working is not going to be there for a long way, is how I look at it. And you see organizations started calling people back to office. Uh, and there are multiple reasons why they are doing this. However, till the time it remains, it is important to develop a certain kind of a discipline when we are working with teams which are remotely located, because you lose a personal touch when you don't interact in person. And it is very important that I share what I am feeling, whether it is manager or whether it is the team member, which doesn't happen so much virtually. Therefore, the effort to maintain a personal connect requires a structure and a discipline, which has which has to be enforced in a manner through a right kind of a process, because otherwise you are leaving it to a manager's discretion as to how he or she wants to establish connect or doesn't want to establish connect. And therefore, those managers who are not conscious about that fact that a personal connect has to be established would lose out on establishing long-term relationship, and people will kind of start moving out. So therefore, you risk the risk of losing people because of lack of clarity on culture or a lack of personal connect. That risk is higher when you're working remotely, because then you're only looking at a face, that too also, which is specific to agenda. Now, how good cultures retain people is because there are a lot of informal, processes. There are informal interactions. There are kind of I would say, customs which are established over a period of time informally, which is how people feel a sense of belongingness or understand the identity of the organization, right? Which will not happen when you're working remotely. So therefore, that risk is very high, and one of the reasons why people are kind of bringing teams back to workplace. The other thing is, if you're not conscious about the right kind of culture and leadership and manager sensitization, whether remote or in office, you will not be able to get people to stay with you, especially you're talking about Gen Z and millennials and Gen Alpha. We are talking today. They have a short attention span. Number one, they have multiple options. Number two, they have very limited tolerance for somebody who is not aligned with how they want things to work. Therefore, our time to react is very limited as leaders, as organizations, as managers. And therefore, it's very, very important to be very responsible in terms of how do you show value, how do you show purpose to people and take the team along.
Right. So I think we all are agreed that culture and manager both are interrelated, interconnected, interdependent, whatever we call. So absolutely, but little marginal edges for the manager, especially in the remote working era when you're working here. So thank you so much, Dr. Sanjeev and Muhammad Rashid, for joining the conversation and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.